you can report that to an election protection hotline. And I'll drop the numbers in the chat in a second. That's a really easy way to help ensure that every eligible voter who wants to have their voice heard can and will in this election. So again, I just want to stress the importance of getting yourself and your friends and your neighbors and your community in general out to vote in both the primary and the general election later this year. I'm so grateful to work with Out for Justice and all the other amazing organizations that we're going to hear from tonight. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stay for the full event, but I'm really glad to have had this time to share some of my thoughts with you all. And if you have any further questions for me specifically, I'm going to drop my email in the chat and you can reach out to me that way. But yeah, that's all I have for you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Morgan. I'm wondering also if you would be willing to drop those like critical dates in the chat, like by when folks have to request their ballot, that sort of thing, just so we can kind of make sure we have that in our minds. Feel free to throw questions at Morgan. I know Morgan's time is limited. She might have to log off shortly, but if you have any quick questions, she's here. And Amir Lewis from OFJ should be logging on a little bit later. So you'll also have another opportunity to ask some voting related questions. So if you can't think of them now, but have them later, you can throw them at him, or you can reach out to Morgan or to Out for Justice at getinfo@outforjustice.com. And we are happy to answer any questions you have. Next we have Dr. Carmen Johnson, Director of Court Watch and Judicial Accountability at Life After Release. And we're excited to hear what she has to share about other ways to get involved.
All right, I'm so glad to be here and to just give my point of view on how to promote accountability, change, and justice. And for me, one of the biggest things that we do at Court Watch, which is a pillar under Life After Release, is we have accountability letters. And from November 2020 to all the way up to last week, we've sent out 311 accountability letters that go to the administrative judges in Prince George's County courts. And it also goes to the chief judge of the state of Maryland. And it also goes to the state's attorney, the chief of police, the jail, pretrial, anything that's dealing with things that are not supposed to happen in the courtroom that's happening, or things that should be happening that's not happening. And because one of the pieces of legislation that we was pushing last session was Zoom access permanently in all the courtrooms in the state of Maryland. So for me, promoting accountability is letting the characters in the courtroom know what's happening. Also bringing awareness to different churches. We've been, meeting with churches on the importance of court watching and supporting the initiative of Zoom permanently for the whole state of Maryland courts. Also pushing our social media and speaking out on what we see in the courtrooms and why it's important for people to court watch, and why it's important again to have Zoom access. And the reason why Zoom access is so important, because number one, we're in 2022. So when the Constitution was wrote, we didn't have Zoom. We didn't have that. So now here we're in 2022, we have all this technology. So we should be up to speed. The courts should be up to speed. As much money as courts make on the backs of, Black and brown people, Black and brown families should be able to Zoom in. A lot of families are disabled. A lot of youth, they live with, at this point, their great grandparents. They're unable to get to the courthouse, but if they're able to log in by Zoom, it is easy for them to show support, because injustice happened in an empty courtroom. And a lot of times the reason why the courtrooms are empty is because either there's transportation issues, or the parents or the grandparents are disabled, or something to that effect. Not to mention it also helps the environment, you know what I mean? And so that's important. Also engaging other organizations in our initiatives that we offer with Court Watch PG, and bringing awareness to the importance of, again, you know, more people need to see what's happening. I know for me personally, my courtroom was empty. And so when I was politically hit, you know, I didn't want no one to know. I didn't know how the system worked. And, you know, in 2015, I quickly found out that injustice happened in an empty courtroom. The other thing that's important to promote change and justice and things of that nature is, for me, I sit on so many different boards that are able to make a change. Like, for example, I'm the chairwoman for advocacy and legislation for the U.S. Attorney for the District of Maryland, our new district attorney, Eric Barron. And it's a pleasure, you know, being able to work with them, because it's the same office that lied on me and did all kinds of cruel things to me. It wasn't Eric, of course, but it was the same office that did this to me. And for them to call me last year and say, hey, would you be a part of, you know, helping us create a reentry board? And I'm looking around thinking, well, wow. And so then this year, February, they said, hey, we're going to make you the chairwoman of advocacy and legislation. And so that's just how the universe works. So being in spaces like that, it just helps promote whatever it is, or whatever initiative for justice that we need. As far as I'm concerned, my personal opinion, it helps. I just got notice that I now sit on the Judges Association, and I'll be on the committee for judge ethics. And so that's another tool to be able to push for change and push for justice, is getting involved, being able to sit at those tables where some people may not feel comfortable sitting at those tables. Well, I mean, I grew up around politics, so I understand how all of this works. But in some cases, I have to go into, for me, I have to go into the lion's den. I got to go into the Fed's den. I got to go into the judge's den in order to make change from the inside out. So that's all I have to say about that. But, you know, we just keep pushing our initiatives. Whether right now our focus is pretrial, and how slimy pretrial is, and how they are keeping our people enslaved. And so that's another focus that is becoming a big thing. And last but not least, you know, keeping the media, keeping a close relationship with different media outlets. Like we're always talking to the media. We have a very close relationship with the Washington Post. We now, you know, Channel 5 wants to run like a, you know, small series on the work that we're doing. And so the word is getting around. And, you know, and like I said, like, you know, churches want us to come and talk about our initiatives and what's happening in the courtrooms, and people are starting to be concerned about mass, you know, incarceration, and people do want to see mass liberation. And that's all I have to say on that. Thank you.
So I'm going to throw a question at you, if you don't mind. What would you say the first steps for somebody who's like less familiar with the systems? Maybe it's their first time wanting to get involved and they're not quite sure how to start. How might they get involved in some of the initiatives that you mentioned? So like Court Watch or with this advocacy around pretrial? What might they be able to do between sessions to get involved?
I think the first thing would be is to go to the House of Delegates and the Senate website and find out who are all the elected officials are. For me, that's the first thing, and find out what committees they work in, and then think, because in our container, like for example, Morgan, her thing is voting, you know what I'm saying? And then over here in Court Watch, our thing is Zoom. Like that person has to figure out what rings to their heart. You know what I mean? But it starts with, first you got to figure out who your elected officials are. And then once you do that, then you got to figure out what mostly am I interested in? Am I interested in people that are still behind the wall? Am I interested in people that are just going through the system? Am I interested in writing policy and legislation? You know, that person has to figure out what they're interested in, because once they do that, then they can start building an army or going to become part of an army. You know what I mean? That's my take on that. Gotta have an army.
Any other questions anybody has?
Well, I feel dry. I feel like maybe I didn't say something right. Becca, I see you just set up. Do you have anything?
I just appreciate your going through the information that you have. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And one more thing, what Becca just scratched out my head is the fact that we think that we don't have the right to do certain things. Like when I applied to be on the Judges Association, I'm thinking, well, first I was thinking, well, I'm not a judge, so how could that? And so I applied anyway. And then they accepted me. And I'm looking around, I'm like, what? Like, what in the world is going on? You know, or people may think, well, I'm scared, I don't have a right to call an elected official. Yes, you do. Your tax-paying money, pay their salaries. So I think once people get past that, the fear, or they get past, they think they don't supposed to do something, then it makes it easier that we are the ones that hold the power. And we are the ones that make the change.
And a lot of times our individual stories that we have, particularly in relation to a particular bill, if we've had a personal experience that with violence, guns, homelessness, anything, our story can very much influence our legislatures. It's just Americans are not encouraged to develop a relationship with their senators and representatives, and we tend to be a bit passive instead of realizing that our power is when we speak up and when we say who we are and what we need.
How many minutes do I have, Elena?
You can say more if you've got more to say.
Yeah, so I'm the former housing chair for the state conference, NAACP. So like I was saying earlier, I was politically hit. And so I went to trial. I refused to take a plea, all of that kind of stuff. They said I was a terrorist. They said that I was ISIS. They said I was dangerous. They had to get me off the streets of Maryland. So I'm making a point on what Becca said. And so I went to the Supreme Court twice, lost all of that kind of stuff. And so I remember the guards I was at a camp, let's be clear. And so the guards had jumped me and spit in my face and all kinds of stuff. It was horrible. And they strangled me till I passed out and all of this kind of stuff, because I refused to answer the inmate. I refused to answer the criminal, because that's not who I am. And so anyway, I called my sister and I said, and I was hollering and screaming in the phone. I'm like, yo, plug in my cell phone and call Congressman blah, blah, blah. And she was like, well, he's not going to listen. I'm like, he is. I'm like, call him and tell him. I'm like, they're going to kill me in here at this camp. And I'm like, call him and tell him and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, make a long story short, after they found out what was going on, 2 congressmen and a senator was able to get me out of that prison camp, and I was freed. And it was no motion filed by my slimy attorneys or anything like that. And they were able to get me out. And when I first told my sister to plug in my cell phone, the last thing she said to me was, she said, it's not going to work, but okay. That broke my heart, because I spent 3 years there. And if they had listened to me before, I wouldn't have spent that much time in there. I wouldn't have spent no time in there. And so my sister had to get the confidence to call. And then when she realized, wait a minute, they getting ready to get my sister out of there. And that's exactly what happened. 2 congressmen and a senator got me out.
I'm so glad you said more, Ms.
I have a
Carmen.
question, Carmen. Hi.
Hey.
So how do we, and this also goes for the young lady that spoke prior, I forgot her name, but this
Morgan.
goes to both of you. Morgan, how do we get more awareness in the community, the urban communities, so that they are aware what is actually happening around them that affects them? Because a lot of times we have the stigma in our community, our urban communities, that voting doesn't matter. They're going to do what they want to do anyway. Very much like your sister, I'll call, but it's not going to work. It's not going to help. How do we then implement a strategy or devise some type of tactic to really get the word out about who is going up to be voted into office, what their policies are, and all of these things? Because once it comes time to vote, a lot of the citizens aren't aware of who they're voting for, what they're voting for, what policies they stand on, what they're, there's a lot of confusion by the media and ignorance, to be honest. So how do we redirect that focus and get our people the important information so that they can vote appropriately, and understand that it's not a problem to call your legislative official or legislated official for an issue?
You start off with an organization like Out for Justice. You know what I'm saying? You contact like different organizations, that deal with you just got Google is a great tool. You know what I'm saying? You Google whatever it is that's in your heart and pull up different organizations. But Out for Justice, Life After Release, Common Cause. I mean, there's a lot of organizations that have been around a long time and that are really doing the work. It's some that are not doing the work, but like Out for Justice and Common Cause and Life After Release and some other ones, JOTF, all of them, they are actually doing the work. But it also takes me back to the new mayor of New York and how he ran on a certain platform, and now can't nobody stand him. And he turned out to be the biggest liar ever, especially as far as mass incarceration is concerned. So they can change the game up as soon as they get in office, but then it takes the people to hold them accountable. And I'm like, okay, everybody know this New York mayor is a slime ball now, so no one's holding him accountable. I'm like, everybody should be in New York, should be in the streets saying, we want you out. We voted for you. We want you out right now. We want you out of office right now. He done gave a large sum of money to the police department. He's saying he's not closing Rikers Island. This is what I hear, quote unquote. And that's just horrible. So a lot of elected officials will run on a certain platform, and then when they get in office, they change up. But then it takes the people and organizations like Out for Justice, like Life After Release, Common Cause, JOTF, and others. It takes them to be able to force them to do what they're supposed to do, and keep the media in your pocket.
And I guess that's what I'm gearing my question to mostly, because the media has a way of televising negativity over positivity. Case in point, I'm an executive administrator for the Pivot Reentry Program. I would have never learned about Out for Justice had I not taken this position. Do you get what I'm saying? So if we have that mindset to make a change, and even if we Google let's think about those individuals who don't have that bravery within them to say, I want to make a change. Let's just think about the grandmother that has her grandsons constantly in and out of prison because they just had to grow up in a tough neighborhood and they became products of their environment. How does that grandmother get educated on these types of things? You know what I mean? How do we reach those people within these organizations? How do we really get out the information that is necessary to make this change? Because it's a great change and you guys are doing great, phenomenal work, but the platform has to be broadened on a bigger scale, if you get what I mean. And I'm just trying to figure out, how do we go about doing
Right,
that?
right. Well, number one, we have a great relationship with the Washington Post. So that's right. We developed and built that relationship with the Washington Post. So we know the information that they putting out from Life After Release is correct, number one, and they have our interests at heart. And number two, the other thing that we do, because we do court watch, everybody that comes through that courtroom, our mutual aid director of Life After Release, her name is Boom, they send out letters to everybody that has gone through the courts that day. So every single day we're sending out a batch of letters. They go to we may not have the grandmother's name, but we'll say it'll be like to the family of so and so and so, or the parents of so and so and so. And then inside that letter is like, hey, this is who we are. Do you need our help? Whatever the language is that we put in the letter. So that's what we do at Life After Release.
And to answer your question for Out for Justice, we are known for being just out in the community. So, our voting outreach coordinator, Amir Lewis, he's kind of barely in the office. He's at community event after community event in the community, just sharing about voting, but also about Out for Justice and the invitation for people to come to our office to learn more broadly about all of the reentry support we offer. Additionally, we host several community outreach events that are purposefully in neighborhoods in Baltimore that are underserved, like our all-night resource fair. And a lot of people learn about us through that event, where people can come and eat and get haircuts, get all sorts of things. And then kind of similar to Dr. Johnson, we use the newspaper. So, just in the past month, we've had 2 op-eds published about the criminal legal system and the reforms that need to happen. So I think you're right, India, there has to be like a lot of different efforts by multiple organizations. Each organization is doing it in their own way. And hopefully between the collection of us, we can reach as many people as possible. Any other questions for Dr. Johnson? All right. So I don't see Christopher Dews in the room right now. He was invited to speak, and I'm hoping he'll join us shortly, but he was invited to speak about what we can start doing between legislative sessions to start stirring up momentum for the policies that we want to change next year. But I suspect there are several people in this room who have been heavily involved in the legislative session. And so I would invite anybody in this room who's been involved in the legislative sessions to talk a little bit about, what do you do before the session starts, before that period of time where they make the laws start? There's all this work that happens ahead of time to propose laws, to build relationships. What does that look like? And what are some ways that individuals can get involved in that?
Elena, who are you talking to?
Anybody in the room who is involved in changing laws during the legislative session, what do you know about the work between sessions to build momentum for those changes?
To keep meeting with the legislators is one thing to get more, you know, do more door-to-door type situations to get more people in the community involved. That way you'll be prepared for, you know, a big old list of people to come out and do a testimony for the legislation, get more organizations involved and things of that nature. Did I hit something?
I think one of us might have hit the whiteboard option. Was that you? Was that you, Dwan? I don't know how to stop that.
Zeke is screen sharing, I think.
I think somebody is trolling us and that should be shut down.
Oh, okay. Did somebody else? Okay. So one of the things that I know Chris Deuce has spoken to and that we try to do between session as well, and just to Dr. Johnson's point, you know, I just posted the link to find your own legislators, and it really doesn't hurt to call them now, tomorrow, or the next day, and just literally tell them the systemic challenges that you've run into, problems that you've had when you go to the Department of Social Services, or if you've been arrested for something that doesn't make any sense for. These personal stories are things you can call today and tell your legislators about. And even though it's maybe a few months before the lawmaking change starts again, it plants a seed in their mind that maybe this is a change that needs to happen. Especially if it's a change that you feel like your friends are running into as well, you can get your friends to call, maybe even all on the same day.
Attending their town hall gatherings too, and voicing your concerns, or just listening to what they're saying and asking them, you interviewing them at the town hall about what you know, what they're saying, and specifically what do they mean by that, and would they be for something.
Anybody else? So one other way that we like to make sure to create change between sessions is in a way to do some research on what the law actually is. Sometimes agencies that you're running into are not actually even following the law. And until you hold that law in front of their face over and over again, they might continue just to kind of circumvent it. So an example is the Department of Housing. There are some laws on the books that protect against criminal record discrimination. However, they very frequently initially deny people for housing based on their criminal record. And very often we have to come back to them with legal support and packages explaining the law to push them to follow those protections that actually should be followed to begin with. And you have the opportunity, if you run into a barrier, to actually look into what the law is, or to reach out to Out for Justice and ask us to work with you to look into what the law is and push back against some of these barriers. Emil, would you like to say that out loud? Oh, you're on mute, Emil.
Oh, sorry. Emil Volchek, pronouns he, him, member of the Baltimore Ethical Society and a supporting member or ally of Out for Justice. I'm not an expert, but I would like to recommend the annual Black Legislative Agenda today, organized by Leaders of the Beautiful Struggle. It's in December, so about a month before the session starts. and they're good at indicating some priorities that you can talk to your legislators about ahead of time. So for example, Delegate Janelle Wilkins spoke about her proposed legislation to reform qualified immunity. So I let my delegates know that I thought this was important and could they support it. A disadvantage of that is that at that point, you still don't know an HB or an SB number, so you can't be quite that specific. So I just, send a general letter and say, hey, please support Delegate Wilkins' bill on qualified immunity. Unfortunately, it didn't make it past the first reading this year, but LBS said that even if you can just write like a month before the session and let your delegates and representatives know what you think is important, then it gives them an idea how to prioritize things, because the reality is that there's tons of bills going through and they can only focus their attention on some fraction of them. And then there's only some fraction of that they can actually put resources to try to actually get through the process. And so there's a lot of winnowing that goes on and a lot of good ideas that just don't make it past the first or second stage. So thanks.
Another option that we will be working on potentially together in this committee is to do some research on certain issues and how they're playing out across the city, across the state. Sometimes lawmakers don't even really understand the full issue. Actually, very frequently, they don't have the facts at hand. And if we can do some of that legwork to deliver those facts to their door, they sometimes will literally read our facts out loud to other lawmakers in the hearings, or it might prompt them again to create a bill to change the law. So between sessions, it's a great time to start doing some deep dives, and leaders of A Beautiful Struggle do some really useful deep dives. So does Job Opportunities Task Force. Out for Justice is about to endeavor on that. And so many of these local grassroots organizations do some deep dives for you, but also you can do some research or work with us and tell us that you want to join with us to do some research on an issue we keep facing. Any other organizations in the room want to talk about how they are starting to strategize either for the upcoming encouragement to vote or the session next year?
I also participate in Maryland Alliance for Justice Reform, and we have meetings, some general meetings, and then the executive board has their own meetings. But in the general meetings, they will, ask, what are your concerns? And it's a good organization. They have 3 committees behind the walls, the people who are released, and then prison. And they have a lot of the research that you're talking about. They've got a lot of data and very well-meaning people, and we work with Out for Justice and Jobs Opportunity Task Force and leaders of Beautiful Struggle to get certain bills passed. And we have a computer whiz that has something called Muster, and he can send out to all of the members of Maryland Alliance for Justice Reform a request that they contact their legislator about a certain bill. And we've had quite a bit of participation among members as far as contacting their legislators. But the guy used to work for NASA, so he knows a lot more about computer programs than certainly I do. But I recommend that as a Maryland Alliance for Justice Reform is another really good organization that's concerned about particularly prison reform.
Jacqueline, I see your hand up.
Hi, Jacqueline. So I am a member of the Baltimore Ethical Society, and I am the subcommittee chair for the legislative subcommittee of the Ethical Action Committee. And one thing I'm particularly interested in, it hasn't risen to the organizational level, at least as of yet, is legislation that passed earlier in the session and is not being funded sufficiently by Governor Hogan. The Abortion Access Act. Governor Hogan has decided that he does not want to appropriate the funding that was appropriated for training medical professionals who are not MDs. So for example, nurse practitioners, physician's assistants to be able to provide medication abortion here in Maryland. They had not been, either they hadn't been able to it or in many cases just hadn't been trained as part of their training to be able to do so. And now, especially given that we're expecting to see huge increase in demand for abortion services, both not just with Maryland residents, but from people of reproductive age in other states that have much more restrictive abortion laws that will likely go into effect if and when, more likely when Roe v. Wade gets overturned. We're trying to do some research to see what we may be able to do, who we may be able to partnership with to try to make sure that the funding that was voted for by our legislators, our democratically elected representatives, actually gets funded as it should be. So if anybody is involved with any organizations that are involved with reproductive justice and are interested in this issue, please reach out to me. I'll drop my email and phone number in the contacts or the chat. So thanks.
I'm so glad you mentioned the funding, watching the funding closely. That's something we noticed with the pre-release bill that passed last year. We were so excited after years of advocacy for this pre-release center bill to pass, for this resource to be available for women. And the bill had $1.5 million in the bill, and it just sat, and the funding went back to the general fund, and nobody said a peep until we noticed that there was no funding. And we noticed this year that still the no funding was added. And unless all of us are keeping our eyes on where the money's going in this budget, they can slip through almost what we call an economic veto. So a bill passes and they actually don't fund it, so it doesn't have to happen if they don't want it to. So that's another great way between sessions to keep an eye on things. So I am wondering from the group, is anybody feeling intimidated, unsure still? Maybe wanting to know more about a certain subject?
I am interested in learning more about the advocacy policy and how to begin, or because as you know, Elena, I do work with the Pivot Reentry Program, Workforce Development Program, where we help women that have been impacted by the justice system. And we find that a lot of times the women are feeling like we're just another group. And if they're coming from incarceration, they run into this repetitive type of feel that I'm grouped out, I've been in this group, I've taken this group. What is your group going to do that's any different? So my concern is, how do I advocate for these women who I was once in their shoes? How do I advocate to reach out to them to help them to understand that this is an ordinary group? This is not your ordinary reentry group where we just try to find you a job. We really work on personal and professional development as it pertains to you individually. We work on help you work on yourself so that you can be a better citizen of society, so that you can start to implement these changes that all these groups are designed to orchestrate.
So in answer to your question, I would first step encourage them to come over to Out for Justice. This is one of our specialties. It's one of the founding focuses of the organization, although we have many, is bringing people of all backgrounds who have experienced the criminal legal system to Annapolis to speak to these laws that need to be changed. So we actually host advocacy trainings throughout the year.
Awesome.
Yeah, we have this advocacy meeting once a month, and that is a really big focus of ours. So I would love to keep talking to you all to to strategize how to continue to make this as accessible as possible, because we cannot create change. We should not create change unless it is guided by people who are most impacted by these systems. So.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I find that we run into the lawmakers making these changes to these laws, but it doesn't necessarily affect their class of demographics, so to speak. So I'm definitely interested in attending the training session. If you could drop that in the chat, I would greatly appreciate it, of when the next session will be held.
Thank you, Dwan. I want to point to the chat. Dwan just mentioned the best way to stay up to date on when the next trainings are coming from Out for Justice. Certainly follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, but also head over to our website and sign up for our newsletter. We are pretty active on giving updates in that newsletter, and that's a great way to stay up to date. Bishop William Hawthorne.
Thank you. How are you, Elaine?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm new to the group, but the concerns, I've reached out on occasion, and I'm glad that I've been invited to be a part of the conversation. And I thank the young lady who brought the issue up of advocacy, and the very fact that I'm hearing that the group is engaged in addressing laws that are on the book that should be stricken, that have long past been obsolete and need to be stricken. I'm an advocate for that as well. My other concern, in addition to advocacy, is the issue of adjudication, because we need to initiate some processes by which there are legal systems or processes in effect to mediate or to adjudicate the legal process that's being, well, I don't want to say plumaged, but thrown on the shoulders of people before they even become incarcerated or convicted of a crime. We don't have a strong system to adjudicate the concerns, the process, the legal jargon, the people who are supposed to be in accountability positions that are sliding through and getting away with a lot of injustice in their decision-making process, in their practices of approaching and profiling, and their methods of just, what's the word I'm looking for? Securing someone in the event that a crime has happened. Instead of treating them like human beings, they're being treated inhumanely. Instead of the facts being leveraged against people, I've come across a lot of developed language that conflicts with the original language that initiated a system or a process, just in a means to trap someone. And there's no help for them. And for people like myself, yourself, your agencies, other agencies, there's really not enough awareness or training or understanding in the process of how to adjudicate on behalf of citizens before they become victims of or identified as criminals, inmates. And so many times, if there was a process involved, and backing up on looking at the laws that need to be stricken, a lot of these individuals would not be compounded with the laws that they're subject to. What do you say, and how do you feel about that kind of initiative?
I think you're entirely correct about the importance of that. And I'm not sure if this fully addresses what the big issue that you're bringing, the important issue that you're bringing, but another initiative at Out for Justice is we support people in participatory defense, which is, although some of us are not lawyers, we have spent a lot of time and work with people to learn what the law is and to see how it's being misapplied in many cases, and to get through these systems that are so confusing and so full of jargon and oftentimes designed to entrap people. And so that is one way that we work between session to address some of these terrible systems of adjudication. I'm wondering though if you have ideas or if other people have ideas to address the issue you're raising.
Well, actually, I'm still at Coppin State University. I've addressed my major to interdisciplinary studies, sociology, and political science with a nonprofit leadership minor. And while I was there, we had to do a mock nonprofit, and this was my pet peeve. And so we came up with the name Citizens Advocacy and Adjudication Alliance. But when I realized this is something that needs to expand beyond Maryland or the city of Baltimore, we need to be a national movement. And we need to focus on training individuals on what the law says and how to utilize the law for their best defense. We also need to focus on ways of being able to bring accountability to those people who, because they wear blue uniforms or green uniforms, think that they are the exemption or the exception when it comes to being subject to the rules of what the law says. So it was my focus, my intention to bring a group of people together to get in touch with the universities, specifically the law universities, for interns, for people who are going into the legal system. As a bishop, one thing that I've learned in going to various seminary schools and theological schools is that all schools have a tendency to educate you and train you according to the belief that they want you to propagate. And it's no different in the legal system. And they reward you based on how effective you are in performing that propagation, being able to execute certain tendencies or mindsets. So if everyone's being trained to be a prosecutor, where have our defenses gone? And if to be a defense attorney or representative gets shunned or frowned upon, then where are the rights of the citizens? And one of the things that I've learned, there are two sayings, one from the Bible and one from a historian. And the historian says that when the people fear the government, it's tyranny. But when the government fears the people, it's democracy. And the biblical perspective is that when the wicked rule, the people groan. But when the righteous are in power, the people rejoice. So we have to figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. But those are some of the ideas. And my team came up with some very good programs. And so I was talking with them, and I was excited because Out for Justice was the very first organization that I reached out to, and due to a friend of mine. And both of us have suffered in retrospect at the hands of the legal process. Now I'm dealing with unjust persecution against my children. And I'm reading the warrant, statement of charges, the facts that they came up with, and nothing is really substantiating, but they were able to take and strip them practically of their identity and their business prowess. They're both in business. They're both doing very well, you know, not as well as other businesses of non-color or minority groups. And, but they're doing exceptionally well. One has, you know, a business in Arbutus off of East Avenue. The other one, the other business is off of Ricestown Road near Pikesville. Well, below Pikesville. The
So
other
Bishop,
business.
Bishop William, I'm going to ask you if you could circle back a little bit. I know that Dr. Johnson and Mr. Schaefer are also waiting to talk, but you're raising such an incredibly important point. Is there anything you'd like to end on?
Being able to have to find, you know, interested bodies who would like to initiate an adjudication training program, and being in a position to actually find ways to bring officers and lawyers and judges and those that are in position of leadership into a place of accountability.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I like to end on.
Yes. And you know, when you were speaking, I forgot to mention every second Wednesday of the month. So third Wednesday is advocacy meeting at OFJ. Fourth Wednesday is membership meeting. Second Wednesday is Lawyer Up, where we have community lawyers come and talk through the procedural mazes of the criminal legal system. So tune in, stay on track with that meeting as well. But I love your ideas more broadly in that area. I saw Dr. Johnson and then Mr. Schaefer.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off of what the bishop was saying. And, you know, with Court Watch, we work with a lot of law students, and they expressed to me that they are shunned on for, you know, taking up being a defense attorney. So that's number one. And then a lot of their programs are being cut because of their studying, you know, to be a defense attorney. And if you're going to school to be a prosecutor, of course, they have more programs and things of that nature. So that's wrong right there. And then the other thing is, with a lot of defense attorneys, especially defense attorneys of color, they find themselves, when they do the right thing by representing their client properly, they find themselves with a complaint to the Bar Association from the prosecution. And so they're caught between a hard rock and a hard space. Do I defend this client who deserves to be defended, or do I have to turn around after this case and defend myself? And it's really, really strange. And at this point, you know, just to, you know, just what the bishop said, you know, my thought is, what is the point of having a legal system? And the other thing is, if you can beat me, why you got to cheat me? And so for me, a lot of the law students are really becoming discouraged for, you know, going to school to be defense attorneys. And a lot of them are changing to civil rights attorneys, or studies, or constitutional law. And so who's going to be defending people, you know?
Mr. Schaefer, did you still want to chime in?
Sure. My name is Charlie Schaefer, and I'm also with the Baltimore Ethical Society, and I'm he, him, and a really interesting discussion, a lot of issues being raised. And I just wanted to mention a couple organizations that might be of help to people who have want to explore these issues. One is our organization, the Baltimore Ethical Society, and we've had in the past a relationship with Out for Justice, and we hope to be able to work more closely. And one of the things are we can, for example, in the legislative season, as Jacqueline pointed out, we can help and research issues and provide people who would like to go and testify, things like that. And also we have weekly platforms where we like to have people come and present ideas and viewpoints that would be interesting to our members, so that a number of the issues that have been brought up today, maybe things that our members aren't aware of and would like to know more about. And somebody could come and make a presentation, talk to us, and then answer some questions, and maybe that would make some connections. And also, there's another organization I have been associated with called Be the Change. And they're an organization which is specifically set up to try to find volunteer opportunities for people who want to get involved. They do a lot of things in terms of campaigns and like that. So I'm unfortunately gonna have to leave in a little bit, but I put my name in the chat, and anyone who would like to contact me to discuss further how either of these organizations might be of help, I'd really like to do that. So that's what I wanted to point out. Okay, thanks a lot. This is really very interesting, and I'm sorry that the Jobs Opportunity Task Force, I was hoping I'd be able to hear from them, because I know they also do a lot of work and do a lot of really good research about the issues that they get behind. Okay, so thanks a lot.
Thank you. So we are going to end around 7:30 today, potentially earlier if we all feel fairly closed. But I wanted to name that next month, again, we're going to, as a group, be working on some projects related to some of the things that have been raised today, or some of your other ideas. This advocacy committee that meets every third Wednesday is both a place to learn about what's going on in many organizations and a place for us to work together in depth on some projects. So I am wondering from the group here, if anything stood out to you that you might want to talk more about next month as a group project, a working project for this committee. And you can drop it in the chat, you can chime in, anything that stood out to you that I should take note of and bring up next month when we start talking about getting down to work.
What stood out to me, Elena, was like the bishop was saying, getting some of those old laws abolished, getting them off of the books completely. Some of these laws are so outdated, they don't even fit into society functionally, if that makes sense, you know. And because that they were written by a particular set of individuals in that era, they really do not apply to the minority that they are placed and enforced upon. And I do think it is very important and key that we as a society, you know, try to collectively come together so that we can all be judged according to a law that governs us all and not just some of us. I think that is a key factor, and that will help to do some shaping and reforming for the justice and legal system as a whole, including the individuals who are penalized by it.
Thank you. Yeah. yeah, what laws just need to go, what laws are being unfairly applied. Yeah.
Yeah. And what laws are being harshly placed against a particular demographic versus another. In comparison to the arrest rate, incarceration rate, we have one group of people that are being incarcerated at a more severely higher rate for one particular law that's being broken versus another demographic. It's completely identifiably biased, but there is nothing to remove, or it just almost seems as though nothing is being done. Like it's almost being overlooked at times, and intentionally being overlooked to keep things at a status quo and to keep them outdated and based back on our forefathers. When times have changed, America has changed. We are no longer the America we were when we first started, when this country was formed.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so strange, you know, it's being overlooked, especially the racial injustice in our criminal legal system. We know obviously that our criminal legal system targets Black and Latinx individuals and other groups of color, Indigenous individuals disproportionately. And we all know that, and yet not nearly enough is being done about it. And it just keeps going. And so I really hear you. And there's a disproportionate representation of white upper class people who are making the laws. And that's
correct. And then a lot of our citizens think that they really do not have a say in lawmaking. They really, they don't have a trust in the justice system. And we really have to work to reform the foundation so that we can get trust in our citizens with the justice system. This is a system created that is supposed to protect the people, but it is against the same people it was created to protect.
Yeah, yeah. Could I just make one last statement, and I apologize.
no, don't know.
But as I look at the process by which laws are applied, I've come to recognize that a person of color versus a person of white origins do the same crime, but have two different stats of laws applied to them. And what I've learned is that it's an issue of perspective. If I can learn and understand how a person's perspective impacts the types of charges they leverage upon a person, then I can have a defense, a better defense, to be able to strike those laws or to strike those charges and to find them invalid. That being the case, a lot of individuals who have been unjustly charged, incarcerated, and handed down a death sentence would have a second life, a second chance at life. And this whole namesake, Out for Justice, with all the other organizations that are out there, would begin to really show forth and demonstrate just cause for the people who are really crying out for help, and they don't have anybody.
Bishop Hawthorne, I would really love for you to keep coming and join us in our work next month, because it sounds like you have a lot of really deep ideas that could use a lot of devoted energy, maybe from our whole committee, to really dive in with you, because yeah, I hear you. Dr. Johnson?
Yeah, I'm sorry to keep bothering you guys, but this is just a great conversation that's going on here. And I was thinking about what India was saying while she was talking. And so one of the elephants, pink elephants that's in the room is the fact that a lot of our elected officials that are Indigenous, Black, Latinx, I think that's what you call it, Latino X. A lot of them, once they get into office, they don't stand up. I can't speak on the Latinos, so let me cross that. I only can speak on the Indigenous American people that look like me. And like, for example, my judge went to Morehouse. My judge grandfather was an activist. And he literally told me in the courtroom, you can't bring up your activist work. You can't bring up your humanitarian work. You can't talk about your nonprofit. You can't talk about all the legal foreclosures that was going on. You can't, he gave a whole list of things. He stripped me down so nothing was left but lies. And so for me, how I felt was, I'm like, yo, I'm saying to myself, brother, you see what they're doing to me, and you're gonna allow them to do this to me? And it was so discouraging. And we have so many elected officials that look like us that are not doing anything for us. We can't keep screaming about racism, white supremacy, da, da, da. At some point, we have to hold our people accountable. And some people may not like what I'm saying, but it's the truth. You know what I'm saying? Again, my judge was Black. And I'm an activist and he's an activist. He didn't even ask the prosecutor, where's the proof that this woman is ISIS? Where's the proof that this woman is a terrorist? Where's the proof that this woman is dangerous? But he already knew who I was, because he said, you can't talk about all of this stuff about you. Nothing's left but the lie. And then you think about, India was talking about like some rules don't apply. I think about the Cal Rittenhouse guy. And then I think about the 17-year-old who just shot up the people in the grocery store. Okay, I've sat in over 3,700, court hearings. And I've seen young Indigenous brothers go to jail for 5 and 10 years for just having a loaded gun on them and they didn't even use it, or having an empty gun and bullets in their pocket. And so I'm like, what's wrong with this picture? And then they say the guy that shot up the Buffalo grocery store, oh, he's 17, his brain is not developed. Okay, well, I've sat in 3,700 hearings, and I've seen young 16 and 17-year-old brothers go to jail for a long time that didn't kill nobody. So I'm confused. So I'm so angry, and I'm a practicing Buddhist. I don't supposed to be angry, but I'm so angry about this system. I'm so angry because I lived it. I went through it. It's India, you are right. This is like a horrible thing. And if you've never experienced it, if you've never been behind the wall for one day, you can't tell me nothing. It will blow your mind. And then you're innocent and go through that. That's even worse. That's even worse. It's horrible.
I literally, I agree so wholeheartedly, Ms. Carmen. And I literally sat in MCIW, Maryland Correctional Institute for Women, for vehicular manslaughter, nonviolent, involuntary vehicular manslaughter, where my cousin and I were victims, both victims, and we died in a car accident. Well, the prosecution claimed that there was no paint transfer from another car, so there couldn't have been another car on the scene. I was 18 years old, I had 2 children at the time, and my case got bounced between 2 judges. One was up for retirement and one was up for promotion on another court, in another court. Neither one of them wanted my case, and I was just so afraid that I was really going to go to prison for 40 years because they had me in there for homicide. They said that the prosecution said I deliberately wanted to kill my cousin and wanted to commit suicide. This was what they thought of me, a woman who is a mother of 2 children in college, working towards her bachelor's degree for business administration, never been incarcerated, never been affected by the law or anything. They sent me to prison for 10 years. I got convicted of vehicular manslaughter for 10 years. While incarcerated, I watched Caucasian women come in on their second and third vehicular manslaughter charges and still leave that prison before me. And I had never had any other charge on my record. And I still don't. I still don't. And I watched this woman who left on home monitoring, the home monitoring program. She went out. You're not supposed to operate a car. Not only did she operate that car, but she hit another individual. These are people that are hitting people outside of their cars and taking their lives. This woman still exited that prison before me. An older Caucasian woman. She still left before me. I had firsthand, I was an eyewitness to the injustice of Black people right in that era of my life. And I knew that somewhere along my journey that God would put me in a place where I could be an advocate for my people and for the many people that face injustices criminally and by the justice system and whole. Something has to be done. And I know that we can collectively come together to truly make a genuine, authentic change for our people and make it better for everyone, since that is the notion on which this country was founded.
Sister India, until we strike fear in the hearts of those people in leadership, there's never going to be a change. And until they get to a place where they understand that we're not just going to sit by idly and continue to allow folks to tread upon us, they're going to continue to mar us under the mud.
So it's time for us to rise up and strike that fear. We have to invoke something that is going to induce exactly what you're saying, Bishop. It's time for us to come together and do it. And I'm not afraid. I understand that when you push the status quo, when you try to push the status quo out the way, they try to get rid of you. I understand that. I understand how they attack your character. I understand how they attack your family. But even Job was offered up by God to the devil.
That's right.
So in that, with that example in mind, I understand that the only one that can take my life is God, and we have to make a stand. We have to make that change, be willing to get in the face of the lion and roar back.
The thing that I learned in the military more than anything is that you have to learn how to play the game. It's all a game. The game is by the statute of the letter. Until we learn how to work the pen and the paper and understand what has gone before us by pen on paper, we will never get ahead. And that's why they say you want to hide something, put it in a book. Because most people don't want to sit down and take the time to read.
Absolutely.
Or to discover what's there in black and white. We are we're quick to hit the accept button when we're applying an app or a new service electronically. But did you read the terms of conditions or the terms of services? Or you know, when you look at it, it's like, oh my God, I want to do this. So let me hurry up and just hit accept. A lot of times we're surrendering a lot of our liberties and our freedoms. We have to stop that.
Agreed, Bishop. Agreed.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories. India, Dr. Johnson, especially Dr. Bishop Hawthorne. Yeah, it is, Dr. Johnson, I know you're a Buddhist, but it is enraging. It should be enraging. And I hope together we can channel that anger, that righteous anger towards change now, and into the sessions to come, the legislative sessions to come. And would anybody like to put out any final words before we close up today?
I do want to thank you, Elena, for having this platform and this opportunity for people to come together of like minds to really invoke a change within this country and the communities in which we live. Like I said, had I not become a member of the Pivot organization, I would have been none the wiser about this organization or any other organizations of the such. I do feel like that these organizations are somewhat, to a degree, kept under wraps. I understand that you all are affiliated with certain media outlets to get information out there, but I do think that the time has come where we really need to make a impact on the social media platforms that our younger generation is captivated by, and really meet the people where they are, so that they can really understand the positions that you all hold, so that they can really get involved and know that their voice makes a difference. That the letters, the writing, the protests, all of that, it makes a difference. And it's essential to the work that you all do. And I just thank you. I thank you all, and I appreciate your time.
So please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, join our email list. We really appreciate all the partners that also amplify Out for Justice action alerts. We put out a lot of action alerts all year round. I hope you will continue to kind of share those in your communities as well. I'm going to drop my email address in the chat. You can always reach out to me. Anybody else is free to do that as well. Also to offer any additional closing thoughts. Well, thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate your time. And we look forward to you joining us next month, third Wednesday. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Night. Stop recording here.